Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. So, I wanted to talk to you guys today about some free resources from Google Cloud, previously known as Google Cloud Platform. I sort of simplified it now, just Google Cloud. So, let's go ahead and jump in and sort of talk about the sort of concepts here, what we're going to be looking at. So, not too long ago, I was at a sort of virtual session of Google Next for Google partners and trainers. And one of the things that they were talking about is that they're doing a whole bunch of different things during the pandemic to, try to help people and sort of, um, just provide some resources for folks. So, one of those is the ability to go ahead and use Google quicklabs completely for free for the next like about 6 months. This is, I think the conference was maybe like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. So maybe a little over 5 months of free access to quicklabs, which are basically the lab environment that you use for all of the Google platform, Google Cloud certification classes, right? So that's basically the lab environments that we'll use for those. So I wanted to go ahead and share out my um, that scale weird. Let me go transform that. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Stretch the screen. Where's my stretch the screen? I'll just do it manually. All right, let's take that over there. All right. Anyway, so Quicklabs is really cool. It's google.quicklabs.com. And basically, what they're going to have is going to have a whole bunch of different classes that are sort of available. These aren't actually the class part, so you don't get any of the lecture or things like that, but they're the lab for them. So what you do is you just go create an account, and then you can go through the labs associated with the Google Cloud Essentials. So that's pretty cool. So I'll basically give you a sort of tour of the environment, let you go create a virtual machine, spin up a Windows machine, use the Google Cloud Shell, get a start with Kubernetes, and just basically get into the certification track to go get the sort of base Google Cloud certification. So you could be looking at a cloud architect position, or it could be a Google Cloud engineer. They sort of diverge once you kind of do the base kind of stuff, but pretty interesting, right? So you go over the sort of essentials here, and then they're going to have a whole bunch of different sort of what they refer to as like learning quests. So you could go ahead and be like the GCP architecture. You could be looking at the infrastructure here. If you want to put Kubernetes on your resume, and that's definitely a good idea, go do the Kubernetes and Google Cloud Labs, and it will be an entire lab based process where you go through setting up Kubernetes, and you go through all the components, you deploy services, you deploy containers, and you will sort of spend some time playing around with this. So that's a really cool thing, and there's a bunch of this stuff that's available. So you know if you're stuck at home and you're worried about what the economy is going to look like down the road, I mean, this is a huge resource, and it's a little bit you know um, not necessarily in my best interest to be pointing this out, right? Because I'm a Google instructor, uh, but I think it's such a useful thing that it's definitely worth you guys taking a look at. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, being that this channel has a big Linux focus, is the Google Cloud free tier. And it occurred to me that a lot of people don't know about this, especially because they're sort of used to the Amazon model. And Amazon does a great thing. I think their kind of free program is like you get a free year of some sort of base AWS services, which is a great way to get started with AWS. And I definitely think that that's something that you should look into taking advantage of yourself. But if you're trying to learn Linux, there's nothing better for you than having real projects that exist in the real world. Setting up a website, hosting WordPress or email, have something that you can kind of get into and kind of do stuff with. And one of the really cool things that Google does is that, first off, they give you a 12-month, $300 free trial, right? Which, is a decent amount of kind of free services. So obviously it needs to be the first time that you're using Google Cloud. You got to go give them a credit card in case, you go massively over that and, spend tons of money. But, definitely go look at something like that. If you're worried about potentially, overrunning your charges or things like that, one thing that you could potentially go do is get like a prepaid credit card and go use that instead. So there'll be sort of like a built-in limit. It would definitely be, not a bad idea to go look at some of the quota stuff that you can go do to set up like billing alerts and things like that. But what I'm going to talk about is sort of the stuff that you have on top of this, right? So this is your free, for 12 months you get $300, right? Which is going to be, pretty useful. So, go take a look at this. This is a really, really cool thing. But the other cool thing is that they have an always free tier. And the always free tier is freaking sick. You get a whole bunch of stuff that's actually useful. Like you can really do legitimate stuff with it. And it's pretty neat. So App Engine, right? So App Engine may not be where you start off with, but if you're somebody who writes code and you're going to be doing it in one of the available languages, so you're doing Python, for example, or you're doing JavaScript, there's a couple different languages that are supported. You could go ahead and write instances and to go launch them into App Engine. And basically you can go run 28 hours a day for free. So more than 24 hours. That basically means one node, worth of compute plus a little bit more. And then 9 hours per day of B instances, and 1 gig of egress traffic. So basically traffic out of the cloud, which is pretty cool. There's some auto ML stuff. You have access to BigQuery. BigQuery is, this is, a place where it could get a little bit dangerous in terms of, spending money, because once you get into data sets that are just massive, you go, do a query a little bit wrong, you could potentially be spending some bucks. So be careful with that. But Cloud Build is cool, right? So that's, basically for source code that you can go have that built on there. Cloud Functions and stuff, these are all neat. Cloud Run, right? So Cloud Run is awesome. This is, I may actually do a separate video on Cloud Run because I like this so much. Cloud Run is completely fully managed Kubernetes. So what you can do is you can take a container. You can do this locally with Docker, or you can go, put it to Cloud Build and do it through there. But what you do is you go create a service, and basically you can deploy that container as a service to the cloud. Boom, 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 done. It's like a couple different commands. After you go build the container, you just go ahead and tag it with a version, and then you can go ahead and deploy that. You can go ahead and use all the kind of normal stuff that you have in Google Cloud to go ahead and do versioning. So you can go push out new versions. I've got a little drawing group that I run. It's a get together with some friends of mine that we typically would do once a week. We'd all get together at a restaurant. We'd have some drinks, do some sketching. And obviously with the pandemic, this is something that we've kind of moved online. So what I did is I use Cloud Run to go ahead and spin up a little Docker instance that we go ahead and use to connect to, and basically just make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of ground rules and stuff, and then redirects you to a conference, right? So it's a really, really simple thing, but this could be significantly more than that because you get 2 million requests per month, right? So that's a lot for a website, right? This is not a small thing. 1 gig worth of network traffic, all right, that might be a little bit limiting, but still pretty good for a small website. If you want to go host your WordPress stuff on here, yeah, that could definitely do it. Cloud Shell is really neat too. Cloud Shell is basically a Linux box, right? Where you get 5 gigs worth of persistent storage, which is basically enough for your dot files, basically some stuff that you might want to go keep in your home directory, and you can go use it as a place to go interact with all the different services, which is why it's there. So basically you can go in a browser, jump on a Linux box that's spun up virtually in a couple seconds, and be able to go do all sorts of kind of quick stuff, which is really, really cool. Now, this instance can be shut down anytime. It's not a permanent instance, but it's a pretty cool thing. Cloud storage, you get 5 gigs worth of storage in US regions. That's not a ton, but it's enough to go put images for a website or static files or things like that pretty easily. And then this to me is the big one. You get a free compute instance, right? Now, I do want to sort of rewind a little bit and just kind of emphasize what this is, right? So this is not the $300 a year. This is always free. So this is free in perpetuity for basically as long as this keeps going on. And I don't have any expectations that they would get rid of this. So for the foreseeable future, right, you can go run a free F1 micro instance, which is not massive, right? It's pretty small actually, but it's plenty for a little Linux box to go play around with, to host your, web server, to go put all sorts of different applications on. This is so much more in terms of resources that were available on servers like when I first started. We could, this is sort of equivalent of like one of the machines that we were running, our core services at an ISP on back in the day, right? So it's not, massive or anything like that by today's standards, but this is very doable. So you can have a website, you can have a machine that's permanently up on the internet that you can go SSH into, that you can go connect to, and you can go ahead and use as your free server that you can do whatever you want with, right? You can go run MySQL on there. You can go ahead and run, a full LAMP stack. You could potentially have this be like a mail server. Now, again, it's not a massive machine, but you probably don't need a massive machine to do the kind of stuff that's going to host your own ecosystem. You could go run OwnCloud on there completely for free. So that's a pretty interesting thing. You have access to Kubernetes engine, GKE, which is basically just their hosted Kubernetes. Now, this one is probably going to exceed the charges because generally you're going to want to go ahead and have at least 3 nodes to go run Kubernetes. So that's probably not what you're going to be looking at. But there's a bunch of this kind of stuff that's really, really, really cool. And, if you go ahead and use something like Compute Engine, even if you go over something like this 1 gig limit, you've got this $300 buffer on top of it. And that's kind of what this is for, right? So, I know we're all stuck at home. I know a lot of you guys are sort of worried about your career, maybe trying to go transition into IT, and you're going to be worried that there's not going to be a ton of jobs out there, in a recession, and you're not going to have the same qualifications if there's a few jobs and everybody is scrambling for them, and that the people who are looking are going to be more qualified for you. And my answer to that is get more qualified, right? Bolster the resume. And one of the things you can take advantage of is the fact that out of the 3 big cloud providers, right, you have AWS, you have Azure, and then you have Google, right? They're all really good. They all have really good market share. But out of the 3, Google has the least. So they are very much trying to incentivize people to use their platform, which means that you can take advantage of resources like this, which, maybe AWS is not necessarily going to be as generous about giving you because they are already the sort of the market leader in terms of market share, right? So, and honestly, this is one of those things where, in a lot of cases, if you were to go ahead and get like an AWS certification, that's going to look really good in the resume. But for most people, if you have a Google Cloud Architect certification and you apply for a job that, is for an AWS architect, they're going to look at that and say, okay, well, I'm probably okay with at least talking to this person, right? Now, you might not get picked up on HR some of the time because sometimes HR is just sort of scanning for keywords. But, if you potentially go out and get certifications, that's a useful thing to go do. And, I don't have anything that I can talk about, publicly, but I would suspect that a company like Google would be looking into ways to go ahead and make sure that people get certifications, even if testing centers were closed, right? So I believe that there are some things that are sort of in the works for that, but nothing that we can sort of discuss, directly. So what that means is that there potentially will be a way for you to go ahead and, study up on things like Google Cloud Platform, get a, potentially an architect or like an associate level certification, and, maybe not have to go to a testing facility, and, be able to go do that still. So this is a really, really cool resource. And even if you don't use it for any of the Google stuff specifically, it's still great free hosting where you can go ahead and spin up an instance, and be able to go ahead and run your own server and SSH into it and do whatever you want to go ahead and do, but also have that happen to live in a modern cloud environment so that you have, plenty of access to it and all sorts of kind of free stuff. So that's a really neat thing. Please go ahead and take advantage of that. It's, obviously, strange times that we're all living in, but I think the thing that's going to make the difference for people is how you approach this, right? Um, Anytime that you have a bad situation, it's also an opportunity. So you have the chance to sort of look at how can I take the state of the world right now and figure out like what are the things that I need to go do in order to be useful. Because if you can get a good paying job right now, there's going to be a lot of resources for you. You can, this is basically how I was able to buy my house. Is I had done fairly well by working in tech for a number of years and had, a bit of money saved up and ready to go. But I basically just held on to it until we had the housing crash because I looked at the numbers and I was like, this doesn't make sense in terms of what people can afford. Like people are paying way too much money for their mortgage, based on their income. So this is going to have to crash at some point. So I just waited. And then when I was able to buy, I was able to buy something significantly nicer than I potentially can afford otherwise. Um, I live in Silicon Beach, which is, part of LA. It's, a nice area. And, I'm walking distance to the beach. That's not something that I would have been able to afford during normal, um, market times when the market was high or market was sort of average. Now I probably could have gone back to work and you know, um, spent tons of time working in a large corporate kind of environment and, had the money to go ahead and buy it. But, it was so much easier just to wait, and sort of be able to have resources during, the last recession. Last recession, I bought a Boxster, for, um, almost no money, really, just by going in there and walking in with cash, and having somebody who was a little bit upside down, have a very recently purchased car with low miles on it, and just said, "Hey, here's what I'll give you. Take it or leave it. Not negotiating." And because the market was really low, they took it. So, if you can kind of leverage this period of time, which is admittedly, going to be tough for the next couple of years, but if you can figure out a way to get into a position where you're making decent money and, all the things people talk about with like work-life balance and the downsides of tech, one of the upside is you will make a decent amount of money. Um, this is also an opportunity. So, if you're younger, you could really sort of build a base for yourself, potentially, to kind of go into the future. And, that's been a very difficult thing to do, especially if you're younger. If you're a millennial, it's been, a tough time, basically for the last, decade or so to try to, make it, in the workforce. And for, Gen Z, it's, probably even tougher. So, I'm getting off topic, but the idea is if you can go in, get yourself a good job, and put yourself in a good position for the next few years, that's going to be a really, really good thing to do. And you have a chunk of time where you're sitting at home. And, if you're furloughed or if you've been laid off, you're unemployed, things like that, yes, this is terrible. I know you're under stress. I know this is tough for you. I empathize. But you can jump on YouTube. You can crack out on videos. You can go down in rabbit holes. You can, watch Netflix all day and play video games, or you can buckle down, right? And if you buckle down and do the work and set up projects, get the credentials, get the certifications, you know, um, have stuff to talk about when you go in a job interview, right? If you go in a job interview and you're like, oh yeah, look, these are all of the things that I did. And they're like, how did you have the time to do all this? You're, 23. Like what were you doing? Well, I've been stuck at home for the last 6 months, right? Or hopefully it won't get that long, but definitely take advantage of that. My hope is that, we're a decent chunk of the way through lockdowns. But I suspect that there's probably going to be a second spike and then we're going to have to sort of lock things down again. So I wish I thought of making this video earlier because I think it would have been a really good thing to sort of put out, really early on during this all stuff because we've already sort of had about a month and a half of lockdown for most people. But yeah, take advantage of it while it's there. I mean, the always free tier, I mean, it's literally always free, so it'll always be there, but your time won't necessarily always be there. So look at some projects that you can go ahead and set up. Look at some things that you can go, put out there. Maybe something like OwnCloud would be a really nice kind of thing to go put out and be able to go ahead and use. Now, obviously, there's not a ton of storage, but if you want to go use that to like sync your address book and have your sort of equivalent to sort of Google Docs and things like that, that can be a really nice thing. And on enterprise grade environments for nothing, like literally nothing. It's a pretty good thing to go do. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now and let you guys get back to watching more interesting videos on YouTube where people don't lecture you about what you should be doing and, working hard in your career, things like that. But if you've enjoyed this video, do the like thing, the subscribe thing, all that kind of stuff. I set up a Patreon. If you want to go do that, by all means, no pressure to go do it. But I think it might be fun and I wouldn't mind upgrading my camera gear, and I'm too cheap to go do it without incentive. So yeah, have a great day. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe, stay inside, wear masks, all that kind of stuff. Not inside, but when you go out. And yeah, check out the always free tier from Google, and you can do all sorts of really cool stuff with that $300. You can mess around with Dialogflow. It's really fun if you're looking for a project. You can go set up some interesting chatbots and phone responses that you can go ahead and give out to your friends to mess with or whatever it is. So anyway, have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.